All right. Welcome back. This is the Front Row Podcast with Coach Mark Gottfried. And I'm always fired up with all my guests because I've had some amazing, high-achieving, phenomenal people. But today I've got a person who I have grown to respect so much over the years. A great player that played at NC State, played basketball there, played a long time in the NBA with the Utah Jazz and the Minnesota Timberwolves, and played a little bit after that as well. But welcome into Thurl Bailey, one of the all-time greats from the Wolfpack at NC State. How you doing, Thurl?
I'm doing great, Coach. Doing great. You're looking good, man. You are looking good, brother.
Not as good as you, Thurl, man. You get younger. You're like Benjamin Button. Every year you seem like you start getting younger.
Oh, man. It's good to be on your show.
Well, it was great to run into you a while back. You were out here in Newport Beach with your family and your kids, your wife, and you guys were having a good old time, and I was so happy to bump into you. But I mean what I said. You know, it was interesting, Thurl, growing up, and you're just a couple years older than me, but I've always, I watched your career from a distance, and then I became the head coach at NC State, and then, we were able to connect, and I've gotten to know you better, but always have been so amazed with who you are as a person. So congratulations to that. You're one of the great people that I've gotten to know, and I've just enjoyed our friendship. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it. Well, my mama raised me right, and my father. Back then, my mom and dad were they lived in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and you know how it was back in the day. You better act right.
Mm-hmm.
You get your butt whooped.
But you went to high school though in the D.C. area. Is that correct? Around D.C.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered. I've never asked you the question, but I've always wondered why NC State. Why did you end up there? How did you end up playing for the Wolfpack?
Wow, that's a journey right there, Coach. The short version is that I didn't really become a player or a decent player until I was like a junior, senior in high school. I got cut in junior high twice. I got cut 7th grade at 6'7" and 8th grade at 6'9".
Wow.
And the game was new to me. The only reason I wanted to play because I sat down next to my dad and I saw a guy with a big old afro playing on TV and found out he was a doctor. And I asked my dad who he was. And my dad said, "Son, that's Dr. J." I was like, "Dad, doctors can play professional basketball?" He said, "No. When you're really good, they give you a nickname." And so that's really what kind of started the passion for me. I wanted to be him so badly. Started growing my hair out a little bit. And had the short shorts on and the tank top. And my dad taught me a few things out on my makeshift court in the yard. But I made the team in my 9th grade year. The coach who cut me twice left. Another coach came in and saw some potential in me. So that started my journey to actually knowing what basketball could do for me growing up in the D.C., Maryland area where nobody was becoming anything. So I won a raffle when I was probably a sophomore in high school. And I went to a basketball camp at NC State. That was my first exposure outside of where I lived. I sold, I don't know what I was selling at the time, but I won the raffle, and me and a few other guys went down to the basketball camp that Norm Sloan was putting on. And I had to be the worst one at the camp. I was 6'10", could barely walk and chew gum. And so when the camp was over, about every month, maybe around my birthday, sometimes twice a year, sometimes 2 times a month, I would get a note from NC State. And mostly it was from a guy named Eddie Biedenbach.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie Biedenbach was Norm Sloan's assistant at that time. And those notes would always be encouraging. Thurl, keep working on your game. Glad to have you at the camp. Merry Christmas, happy birthday, or whatever. I never forgot that. So when I became really good and the recruiting started and the coaches came to the house, and it was a tight race between University of Maryland, Lefty Driesell, and Georgetown, John Thompson. Actually, Davidson was in that because Eddie Bietenbach left NC State about that time and took the head coaching job at Davidson and then North Carolina State. So NC State won it over. I liked what they had to offer. I knew Coach Sloan's legacy. And so that was how I got to NC State. And at the time, I didn't know that two other guys from the area had signed to go there too.
That's right.
Till I got there.
That's right. How about that? You know, I've never heard that, and you and I've never talked about that. And as you're saying that, I'm asking myself, how hard was it for you? You know, especially as a younger black guy that's coming out of that area, because John Thompson, even for all of us, didn't matter if we were white or black, but he was such a role model and such a his presence was so amazing. If he's recruiting you, was that difficult to say no to him?
Was so difficult. One of the hardest decisions I'd ever had to make in my life at that time, my young life. Of course, I kind of relied on my folks to give me their advice, but to their credit, they made it my final decision. And so I tell you what almost got me to Georgetown. You know, I'm into music. You see all these vinyls back here. Been collecting them since I was before high school. I got a phone call one day at home. My mom answered the phone, and she handed me the phone, and she said, "There's somebody on the phone for you." And so I got the phone, and then I said, "Hello?" She said, "Is this Thurl Bailey?" I said, "Yes, who's this?" She said, "This is Thurl Bailey, the great Thurl Bailey, the great musician." She was really good friends with John Thompson. And basically she said, "Child, you know you need to go to Georgetown."
Oh boy.
I was such a big fan. I was such a big fan. You know, you coaches, you pull it out, man. You pull the ringers out. And so that almost swayed me to Georgetown, right in my backyard, right in the area. And so I decided, though, that it was probably best for me to kind of go home away from home, which was North Carolina. My grandmother was down there. I needed to grow up some, kind of get out on my own. And that was really what swayed me to go to NC State. How
about when the coaching change then happened at NC State? You know, nowadays you've got the portal, you got NIL, you know, guys just would transfer. They're just out, you know, they're not even, it would be hard. But for you, from the staff that recruited you to go to college and play, and then all of a sudden, because that happens. It happens to a lot of kids. It happens all the time. And talk about that transition, because that had to be a little bit maybe unsettling at that time for you.
But kids don't understand that, right? I mean, especially back then, kids don't understand that that was part of the business of basketball on that side of things. Coach Sloan got a better offer. I went to Florida, and I was freaking devastated. I was going home, Coach. We were all we were all in disarray. It was kind of an uproar around there because, you know, Sidney Lowe was trying to figure out what he was going to do. Derek was trying to figure his deal out. As a matter of fact, they both were kind of trying to recruit their high school coach from DeMatha to come and be the head coach there. And turn the job down. I was going home. And I called my mom. I remember calling my mom and saying, "Mom, Coach Sloan, they just announced to us that Coach Sloan wasn't coming back." And you know how it is as a kid. Like, during the recruiting process, you're kind of the surrogate parents to these kids. So, you know, the first question my mom would ask any coach when they came to recruit, "You're going to make sure my son gets an education, right?" Because that was important to my parents. It wasn't about the basketball. That was the vehicle. Then the coach would say, "Yeah." My mom would say, "Don't make me come down there." You know how mothers do. But yeah, I called my mom and said, "Mom, I'm coming home. Coach Sloan's leaving." She said to me, "Son, you may be going somewhere, but you definitely ain't coming here." And so she said, "You're going to wait. You're going to wait and see what happens, see who this new guy coming in is. And if you don't like him, then we'll talk about going somewhere else. But you're getting your education." So I did. We waited. We got into this small room, and in walks this confident, strutting in coach that we had no idea. We didn't know what an Iona was. And so he comes in and introduces himself, Coach Valvano, and this is what he did. He said, "Look, I'm going to speak to you guys for about 20 minutes. And if after that 20 minutes you still want to go, I'll sign your release."
Wow.
Come on, coach. Who takes that kind of risk?
Wow. Wow.
20 minutes. In 20 minutes of what you're getting ready to say to us, because you know us young kids, we don't want to hear it. We're standing there, arms crossed, feet out. We didn't probably want to look at him. We didn't owe him anything. We didn't trust him. He didn't trust us. So this relationship was really meaningless at the beginning for us. But then he started talking. He started talking. First thing he said is, "I know." He said, this is how he said it. "I know I'm going to win the national championship, guys."
Wow.
He says, "I know I'm going to win one." And personally, I thought it was kind of selfish, right? Because I'm thinking, well, who does he think he is? That guy down the street in the blue and white? And so he talks about his dream and how he's dreamt about it. He knows it's going to happen soon. And he hopes that we jump on board and help him build it and get to the ultimate goal. That was our first introduction to Coach V. And nobody left. It was so good. That 20 minutes was so freaking good. You felt like if you left, you would have missed out on something. You probably would have.
Isn't that interesting? And, obviously, Coach Valvano, Jimmy Valvano, ended up passing away. But prior to that, I got to know him a little bit. I had played at Alabama. One of my college roommate, Jim Farmer, who I think you know Jim.
Oh,
and Jim played for Coach V out in Hawaii. That was back when they had the college all-star game back in Hawaii way back then. I remember Jim coming back saying, "God, I just love this Jim Valvano guy." And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, like, all right, but he just talked about the charisma and, how much fun he had playing for him. And that was an all-star game, a little different, but still. And then over the years, getting to know him so well, but he just had that kind of persona about him. There was, like you said, a confidence, but talk about just him, his personality. He became, bigger than life at times, and but also very, very well liked and very, very well respected.
He really was. And, with any coach and player relationship, there's got to be trust there. And you look back, your coaching career and how you established those kind of things. Coach Valvano was just very meticulous on making sure that the relationship part was the most important. And so he got to know us individually. Right? He got to know what motivated us, what got us going, what ticked us off. He got to know how to handle us in certain situations. In practice, there were some guys you had to yell at. You know that. Guys only listen to or react to one language. And it wasn't a negative type of thing. It was, this player needs this from me right now. And, I was the kind of guy that you just tell me what you want. Tell me what you want me to do, coach, and I'll get it done for you. And so he was so good at building those relationships, not just with him and the players, but with the players among themselves, and giving guys like me as a senior and Sydney and Derek as a senior responsibility to step up as leaders and be the leaders when he wasn't there, or be the leaders when he was on the sideline. And so it was such a, and the staff around him, everybody had their role to play, but B was the real deal. A lot of times you'll see a guy in public or on TV or in an interview, and B was always that way. You could hardly tell when B was having a bad day, because he wouldn't bring that out around you. And so he was always focused on the ultimate goal. It was focused on winning the national championship. Because of that statement he made when we met him, he said, "There won't be a day that goes by that I won't remind you whatever we're doing, of the ultimate goal. We're going to do something every day. Even if we're away from basketball, we're going to do something that's going to remind us how we're going to get closer to getting to the ultimate goal. And then this other thing was just, we just have to be in a position to win. And you've heard that quite a bit. Be in a position to win. We're not going to win every game. We're going to get blown out by 25, 30, maybe one night. Going to win by 20. But the ultimate goal, put ourselves in that position, then we can get there. He believed it. He believed it.
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful? And, you know, Thurl, my time there, you know, I was the coach there for 6 years at NC State and got to know a lot of you guys, and some of the players are a little bit older than you as well that played on the, you know, 74 national championship team. And then you've got the 83 nationalship team, which was your group of guys. And completely different, obviously, kind of sets of people. But I kind of felt when I was coaching there that the 74 guys, which, by the way, now, let's not forget, David Thompson was probably arguably one of the best college basketball players ever, like ever, and just period, end of story. But that group, Tommy Burleson was, I think, the second overall pick. He was an Olympian. They had a great group, and then your group in '83. But it just kind of always seemed to me a little bit like the 74 group, those older guys. They kind of felt like your group got all the attention. Did you ever sense that or feel that? Because I did. Because I'm in the middle as the coach, and here I've got these two great. I mean, there was a lot of great players that didn't win national championships too, and great teams. But you had these two teams, and both amazing in their own right. They're both amazing teams with amazing players, but I kind of felt like that. Did you ever sense that a little bit or not? Or am I out to lunch on that one?
I never sensed it from them. I mean, I got to be around those guys and meet them, and you know, especially DT, one of the greatest guys you ever want to be around. And Tommy, you know, very humorous. Monty Towell, I was probably around him the most out of anybody. I never got that feeling from them, but I could kind of see if I were in their shoes and they accomplished something as big as they accomplished. I could kind of see it happening. I don't know. I mean, that was before my time, so I don't know whether it was expected of them, if that journey for them to win that national championship was, if they were picked to potentially win it. So the journeys are much different. Right. When you look at what we had to go through, I'm not saying one is better than the other. We're all champions. What I'm saying is sometimes when you're on the outside and you're watching sports or you're reading a book, what are you looking for? You're looking to immerse yourself in a journey and a story that you wish you could be part of. And that's why they call it Cinderella, right? I mean, because there's so much that goes on in the beginning and finally the shoe fits. And I think that with the 74 team, it was a great accomplishment. There's no doubt. Break the UCLA streak, right? And you go on to beat Marquette for the championship. That was a great team that was, you know, destined to win that championship. So all I know is where I've been. And if last season, NC State could have taken that journey a few steps further and won a national championship, I would have been so amazed. I would have been part of it. I would have felt a part of it. So I think that is what the answer. We all should feel a part of each other's success because we came to the same, you know, through the same alma mater. So no, I never felt that from them, but I could kind of see it. I mean, our journey gets a lot of attention every single season. When you talk about survive and advance, I believe it was V that coined that.
Yes.
Every single season, when you talk about March Madness, I believe we were right at the beginning of that. You know, Magic and Bird had something to do with that too. But, you know, I just think that what we represented overall to all people, right? The Davids, you know, the underdogs, that kind of thing. Maybe made for a bigger story.
Well, there was no question about it. And for those people that are watching and listening, and Thurl Bailey, obviously one of the great NBA player, but a great college player, had a great run at NC State. But that team in 1983 that won the national championship, Jim Valvano, the head coach, a lot of people forget and don't realize that going into the ACC tournament, and you had some injuries throughout the year, and you probably lost a few games here and there that you probably would have won if everybody was healthy, but probably not a bona fide team that's going to get selected into the tournament until the ACC tournament. So kind of walk me through that one a little bit, because you guys, backs are against the wall. The story never happens if you don't do what you did in the ACC tournament. There is no Cinderella story of NC State basketball without that.
You're right. There was no guarantee with just 16 wins, I think 9 or 10 losses, that we were going to get in. I'm not sure we would. I don't think we would have. I just don't. I think there were just too many teams that were. We had the strength of schedule was up there. We played. University of Virginia was between 1 and 2 and 3 all year long, right? Carolina was up there as well. And we played some other teams that were Louisville that was pretty well ranked. So we knew that in order for us to seal our fate in the dance was to win the ACC tournament. And, you're going up against Ralph Sampson, Virginia. You're going up against, young Michael Jordan and Perkins, and I think Worthy was gone then, but Dean Smith's teams were always amazing and right there. And Wake Forest with Delaney Rudd wasn't, they weren't a pushover as well. So we knew the task at hand, and that was our mindset. And I think part of what helped us was everybody else's mindset towards us, right? A lot of times people ask you, well, how are you approaching this game? What do you feel like? Well, we're pretty confident. We're going to go in. We don't have a lot to lose, right? We know about this dream, and if it stops right here, we gave it our best shot. But there were teams who were expected to be there. And so, but we were good too, Coach.
I know.
You might not have heard a lot about us. Those injuries you talked about,
yeah.
Derek Whittenberg out against Virginia, first game.
Yep.
That, in a weird way, helped us. Mm-hmm. It helped Ernie Myers step in to the spotlight and become who he would become. It helped Lorenzo Charles grow. Helped Ozell McQueen come in and play his role, and Terry Gannon come in and get some minutes as a sharpshooter and a really good defender. Mm-hmm. And so those kinds of, I call them pit moments, the tough moments you go through, and you think things seem like it's all over. All of a sudden, you get really good things from that, and then your guys come back, and then Witt comes back, and we're so much better for it. But we go in and beat Wake Forest, and we beat Ralph Sampson really for first time in a long time.
That's right.
And then we go up against North Carolina, and a 3-point shot at the end by Sam Perkins was about that much off. I thought it was down. So Michael Jordan fouls out that game.
Yep.
But that was when the magic, I think, really happened, was when we won that. We started to get that momentum and never look back.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story, Thurl. I'm sitting on my couch one night. So when I was coaching at UCLA, I coached with Jim Herrick, who was before UCLA. He was at Pepperdine. And Jim was the coach at Pepperdine that played your team, NC State, in Corvallis, Oregon, in the first or second round game up there. And anyway, I had heard about this game forever. I kept hearing about Pepperdine had the chance. They're up 6 with about 50 seconds to go, and they, NC State starts fouling, and they're starting to foul this guy named Dane Suttle, who was, by the way, their career free throw percentage leader in the history of Pepperdine University basketball. Anyway, you guys kept fouling. I had heard about this. Well, years later, They're doing a show on TV at something, and my phone rings, and Jim Harrick goes, "You watching ESPN?" And I turn it on, and they're showing the end of that game, your game. And now I'm watching it. I've heard about it for years. And Pepperdine, who had a pretty good team, by the way, that year, very good team, they're up, I think, 6. About 50 seconds to go, and you guys kept fouling them, and they kept missing foul shots, and it actually came down to Cozell McQueen getting an offensive rebound basket on a foul shot, on a missed free throw, and he puts it back in to force the game to overtime. So that was another one along your way, Thurl, where you're close to being over. That game right there. Kind of go back and tell me what your thoughts were end of that game.
In this whole thing, there's got to be some luck involved. Things have to line up, right? Other teams have to lose. You've got to take care of your business. It's all you can control. But it was that was our, to me, that was the toughest game. That was our toughest game in the whole run, in my eyes. Yeah, Houston was great, but I think at that point, our confidence was like through the roof. Not overly so, but to the fact that we knew we could hang with anybody. But and Jim Harrick, I've had a chance to sit down with him and have lunch with him after that time, and just an amazing guy. But you talk about the ultimate risk taker, right? Coaches weren't doing that back then, right? They tried to get away with an NBA, but now it's a take foul, right? So, right. Coach V was like, guys, this is the biggest stage in college basketball. I don't care what he was shooting, during the course of the season. Yeah, he might be pretty good, but can you make them both? Can you make them both, right? And so Dane Solo was the guy.
That's right.
And that game, too, was crazy because you talked about Cozell McQueen's put back on the free throw line. Right before that, he went to Lorenzo Charles and said, "Lo, let's switch sides, right? Because I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna come and switch sides with you." And so right before that free throw was taken, that we missed, Cozell switched with Lorenzo, got that shot and put it in. And I love Cozell, but he wasn't a great shooter. He wasn't known for his shooting, I should put it that way. But on that particular day, fate put him in the right place at the right time, and then we lived to play on. But the fact that we were fouling a guy who was shooting 90% the free throw line at that time, and then you go back and you watch the game, because we were all tape delayed back then. And the announcers, I think Sidney fouled out that game.
Yep,
Sidney Lowe fouled out. And so the announcers were saying, well, Sidney Lowe, a great career, too bad for him and the Wolfpack. And all of a sudden, we come back and win that thing. And it was just, and again, that was the momentum that we were carrying after that ACC tournament. And then we go home and the crowds got bigger, and it was amazing to go through.
And Thurl, you had an opportunity then, as that year in '83, it continued on to where you're playing for the national title, and obviously, Houston was just they were amazing. Their talent level was off the charts, but it comes down. It was an unbelievable game, but it comes down to where Derek Wittenberg, who I brought back to NC State when I was coaching there, and he's still there, and I love him to death. But, Derek has made a living off an air ball. I tell him that all the time. You shot an air ball, and Lorenzo Charles caught it and dunked it. So, quit talking, Derek, about how great your shot was, because it was an air ball. So all of a sudden, Lorenzo Charles, catches it, dunks it in at the buzzer. And the story then, it's an amazing run. But what were your thoughts as that ball was flying through the air, and it's going to come up short. It's not close to the basket.
Everybody knew. Yeah. Well, let me go back first because we get together. We try to get together every few years, and so we all went back. And Derek has this gift for us. Right? I don't know if you've seen it yet, but he has this gift for us, and he gives us all these things, and we pull it out. And this is what Derek has for us.
The pass.
It's part of the floor, but look what he puts on the top.
The pass.
Now, that's quintessential Derek Wittenberg, right? Right?
Unbelievable.
But it's etched in my mind. It's etched in anybody who enjoys great endings or great stories. First of all, I remember I had a pretty good first half. I had 15 in the first half, and none of our front court could score at all. I mean, Olajuwon was just doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
And, Derek Wittenberg and Sidney Lowe really were the two, and Terry Gannon really were the three that brought us back into that game offensively. But yeah, I remember going back in that game and seeing that ball move around, and Sidney threw me the ball in the corner with about 7 seconds, that left corner. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I wasn't confident. I didn't think I had a great shot, but the defense had collapsed down towards me, and I saw a space for me to throw a baseball pass, what Derek calls a poor fundamental pass. That's what he's. But I threw the ball to Derek, and he caught it. And Benny Anders, right as Derek caught it, Benny Anders gets a finger on it. Now, Coach, if Benny Anders steals that ball,
it's over.
This podcast conversation would be a lot different than it is today. Okay, but Derek grabs it and he heaves it up, and everybody in the world could see it was falling short. And I believe that's really one of the things that stopped Olajuwon or anybody else in the Houston team from going up and messing with it, because they thought it could be a potential goaltend, and they didn't want to chance it. Mm-hmm. And so Lorenzo Charles, the mature Lorenzo Charles, had the wherewithal to just go up and dunk that thing in. And I don't think he knew what was going on when he dunked it. Mm-hmm. But that was it. That was the pinnacle of going back to that first discussion we had with Coach Valvano. Mm-hmm. He knew it. He felt like he knew it was going to happen. Maybe he dreamed it into existence. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those magical rides that, man, you couldn't write a story like that. Yeah, it's just,
what's always what's always stood out to me too, Thurl, was that that team, your team in '83. Now the game has changed now with the 3-point line, and that was pre 3-point line in college basketball, and so the game was a different game. But you guys really played, and you got to give Jim Valvano so much credit. I used to tell people this all the time when I was in Raleigh, because he really played 2 guards and really 3 forwards. Now, they played you as a quote-unquote small forward with Lorenzo Charles, who was the mountain of a man, big, physical, strong, thick, muscle man kind of looking guy, and then Cozell McQueen, who's 6'11", and great defender, maybe not a great offensive player, but you really played kind of 3 forwards and 2 guards. There wasn't a lot of teams that did that, truly, back then. No. And, if you had the 3-point line in, maybe, his thinking could have probably, who knows, you can't go back. But I've always thought, and even when I coached at NC State, just kind of the creativeness and the ingenuity for Jim Valvano to have that lineup. Because some coaches would have played maybe 3 guards, 3 smaller guys with 2 big guys, and you guys pretty much played with the 3 forwards.
We did. And, I was kind of a stretch 3-4, because they brought in the experimental 3-point line in the ACC, and it was like right in the middle of the key, right above the free throw line. It's like, that was pretty close. And Derek was shooting like NBA threes back then. And so I was kind of a stretch 3. So I think it really leans to the coach knowing what he has in his players and what he could get out of them.
Yep.
And, some of that's taking risk, just as well as I do. Some of that's taking risk. Coach B, a lot of times we'd have a game plan and we'd get out there and scrap it, right? Because it didn't work. Even defenses, when we played like a triangle and 2 or a box and 1, we put 2 guys on Ralph Sampson, me in front of him and Cosell behind him. And it won us some game. It won a big game in Ogden, Utah, when we played in that second round. But yeah, I mean, times have changed, and I think Coach Valvano was very creative in what he did. He was a risk taker. I don't think he got enough credit really for early on for the way he coached.
I would agree 100%. Thurl, let's switch a little bit now. So you're in the NBA and you had just amazing run. And, my mind as a basketball fan, and, I was playing college basketball during your early years in the NBA. And then, I drafted by Detroit and in and out. But I always thought you guys had such an amazing team in Utah, fun to watch. But I tell people all the time, it's interesting to me how when you talk about the greatest coaches in the NBA of all time, and obviously Phil Jackson and what he did and the run he had, but I think, this is my opinion, I think you played for one of the best ever, period, in Jerry Sloan. I was a guy that wanted to go into coaching, and then I become a coach, and so I'm watching Jerry Sloan, and you guys are running the UCLA cut, and he's so creative, all the different little wrinkles that he had. But your teams were so good, and boy, guys knew their roles. They understood why they were there and what to do. But would you agree with that? I mean, with Jerry Sloan, and you had the opportunity to play for him, and from a distance, and I got to know him just a little bit. Wasn't very close to him, but boy, did I think he was good.
You would have loved him.
Yeah,
you would have loved hanging out with Jerry. I can promise you that. First of all, Frank Layden drafted me. He was the head coach then. He drafted me. I remember talking to Coach B about where I would go in the draft and who was talking, and he knew all this stuff, and he would just kind of set me down and go over it with me. And you may go 5 through 7 or 8. Golden State really likes you. The Jazz really like you. So he helped in that sense of answering all their questions about me, because they didn't do like the interviews that they do now with players when they go to camp after pre-draft camp. So they had to get all their information from other people, and so got drafted. Frank took over. Frank was amazing. Frank was underrated as a coach too. Very funny. Yeah. He decided to turn the reins over to Jerry. And I remember a lot of our practices, Jerry was not really an assistant. Jerry's reputation had already preceded. We knew what a tough player he was. At the time, the only retired jersey for the Chicago Bulls hanging up in the rafters, the only one. And so we knew his reputation as a tough guy. And that's how he coached. He wanted us to be physical. He wanted us to be tough. He wanted guys who would, have each other's back. Matter of fact, he'd be the first one out there on the court.
Yep. Right.
Trying to fight somebody. Things went down. But he was just an amazing, and this is what he would tell you when he first came on board. He's like, I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything. So I'm going to surround myself with guys who can come in and help, one, teach me, but also work with me to build a championship team. And that's when he hired Phil Johnson, who was a great coach in his own right, coach of the year, as a matter of fact, one year. So he and Jerry became close. You wouldn't see one without the other. And as those teams were built, my first experience with the playoffs was my rookie year. Jazz had never made the playoffs before that year. We had Adrian Dantley, Darrell Griffith, national champion from Louisville, Ricky Green. So Stockton and Malone weren't there yet. So we made the playoffs that year, and then the organization made some great moves, and remember on draft day when they had the draft day in the arena, and they announced that they would pick a guy from Gonzaga. Nobody knew what a Gonzaga was then. And they announced John Stockton's name, and there was so many boos in that arena, in the whole arena. They didn't know who this guy was. Who's this white kid that, he's not fancy. He comes from a school we don't know. And so, yeah, it was the start of something really amazing. Then the following year, they drafted a mailman, and boy, he delivered, didn't he? So those were some great fundamental teams under a great coach who was no nonsense, wasn't fancy, was fundamental, was just come in and beat you down all night long. And those were the years that the Jazz really gained a lot of respect across the league.
I always say too, because I scouted for Dallas, and sometimes there's a little bit of luck involved too. We all get a little bit lucky here and there in life, but for them to draft, and now you had the great run because you were a national champion, but like in high school, and you weren't like the greatest player of all time. You became much better later. And then to do your homework on a player and really find a guy like yourself, but then also, like you mentioned, they drafted a John Stockton out of Gonzaga, which Gonzaga was not then what they are now. And then you draft Karl Malone from Ruston, Louisiana at La Tech, not powerhouse, schools that are on television all the time. And your core group that you guys then had, including yourself, that was a core group there. You got to give Utah just an amazing amount of credit for being able to do that, and then kind of building what you guys built there in Utah for a number of years.
Yeah, and it doesn't, you're right. It is, some of it is luck. But I'm not sure. I know back then it wasn't about analytics as much.
Yeah.
It wasn't about looking at a piece of paper and saying, what did this guy do here? How good did he shoot on this day and that day and this whole year? It wasn't really about that. It was going and watching a guy perform and then projecting what he could do for you, right? How good can he be? Yeah, okay. Everybody would like to win a championship now, but man, we keep this kid around. I think he could be. That's the only reason I made it in high school and junior high, because people saw potential what I could be. And then I just had to put the work in to live up to that. There wasn't a lot of guys transferring. That's when rivalries began. That's when we started those rivalries, actually, sometimes in high school, but in college, when great players stayed at least 3 years, right? And so the developmental part was paramount back then. And then, so you developed your game in college, and then you moved on, and hopefully you went to a program like the Utah Jazz, who historically has developed guys into really, really solid players, right? And then they get really good, and then some of them leave, which they hadn't, right? And so, the Jazz have historically been that kind of team who has developed players. Now, the business of basketball has changed, as you said, now. But, back then it wasn't a hit every time, but it was the right ingredient, right, to make you better every single season.
Could you see it early, Thurl, in John Stockton when he was young? Could you see it that he was that good of a floor leader, passer? Boy, did he – you talk about a guy probably still to this day doesn't get the credit he deserves as far as being one of the greatest of all time. But could you see that early on with him?
No, I couldn't. But that's not a bad thing, because I don't think I was a great player. I didn't just come out of college and turn into a very good NBA player. I had to learn the game. I had to pay my dues. I had to carry bags. I had to sit. We flew commercial. I had to sit and coach. So it was about coming in and paying your dues, and it was about not just being drafted, not just making it to the NBA, but staying. John Stockton held out. He held out. They were going to give him 50,000. He held out for 60.
Wow.
I believe he probably kept 90% of that. Didn't spend. I mean, I used to go pick him up at his apartment, and it'd be freezing in the winter. It's like, John, turn the heat on, dude. John wasn't about to spend a lot of money. He didn't know how long he was going to last. So he wasn't about to spend a lot of money. And so, but he had a good mentor. He had a good mentor, Ricky Green.
Mm-hmm.
Ricky, they call the fastest of them all.
Mm-hmm.
Ricky has a great story coming from the CBA, and Frank Layton out in Montana. He wasn't even out there for basketball. He decided to go to a basketball game and saw Ricky Green play. And Ricky came back, played for the Jazz, and then John would learn from Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could start to see some things start to come out, because I was on one of those second teams in practice against the starters. John was on my team. And coach, sometimes we just light up that first unit. And so, and John was just, some of the things that he was, some of his nuances, he was a gym rat. I mean, the guy was just like scrappy. Players ended up calling him one of the dirtiest players ever. He wasn't really dirty. Excuse me. He may have looked like that, but he was just high IQ. He wasn't afraid of anything. We weren't going to rest him. I don't care if he was 70%. He was going to play. We just didn't do that back then. Mm-hmm. But you could tell there was a toughness about him. And then when his running mate, Karl Malone, that took a little while to develop as well. But once that clicked, my goodness, what a foundation.
Yep, sure was. You know, Thurl, you look back in sports, I've always done this, you know, and this might have been just right after you left. And again, I'm just a fan at this point. It kind of broke my heart when you went to Minnesota, by the way, because I always liked you with Utah. But anyway, you ended up playing for the Timberwolves as well. but some teams, just because of the era, it just happens. I mean, you know, and you watched Michael Jordan, obviously, through college. Your years were pretty similar. But Utah probably, if it wasn't for that run the Bulls had later, and some of that was after you were there too, but started probably while you were there. Utah probably wins the world championship. You probably they got championship banners, but they just happen to have this other team over here, and this guy wears number 23, plays for the Bulls, and it just, you know, like if you're a golfer coming up in the Tiger Woods era, you might have been really, really good, but you might not have won because of that other guy over there, Tiger Woods. Did you sense some of that with Jordan? And I know you watched him come up. You know, you guys were playing against each other all the way up.
Oh, man. Yeah, it takes a team to do it. But Michael, that guy was just, I mean, there were some games that were over before they even started. Not necessarily with us, but when you faced Michael Jordan and his team, you knew you were in for it. Now, it wasn't that you couldn't win, but it was going to be a battle with that guy on the team. He was going to try to will his team to win in some way. And when you have a leader like that that he demands that much out of you because you know he's going to bring it, you know, he's proven to me that he's the greatest. Now, that was our era, and people will argue that point. But yeah, first of all, I went to Minnesota. I didn't choose to go, but the business of basketball took me to Minnesota. And I kept my home here in Utah. So I would come back because, you know, we were done early in Minnesota after we won our 11 games out of 82. So, and I come to the playoffs, and I was at all those games and got to know the guys as well, the new guys that were on the team. But I mean, that was the Jazz's biggest chance. But again, Michael Jordan somehow finds a way, somehow found a way to get it to the championship. But yeah, I mean, I have no doubt. I have no doubt that those 2 years, the Jazz were the closest ever getting to the championship. That if it had not been for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that guy. Yeah, it's a team, but it's that guy.
Yeah.
The defining, person who he just found a way to do it.
Yeah.
And so
yep.
when you're up against that, taking nothing away against the Jazz, they were formidable. Everybody respected them, and even the Bulls respected them.
Mm-hmm.
But they fell short. But they're trying to get back, Coach. Trying to get back,
and I think they will. Let me ask you this one, Thurl. So when you played in college at NC State, and there's a younger generation, they don't really get it, but that's okay. It's all part of the turf. But you look back at the ACC then, and you had you guys at NC State that were phenomenal. People probably forget, we don't forget, but younger people probably don't even know how good Ralph Sampson was at Virginia. You've got Lenny Bias, who I played against Lenny twice in college, and I had never seen anybody like that, that was that athletic and strong and quick. And you got Michael Jordan and that whole group, and Worthy and that group over there at Carolina. You can go through the league, but the talent level of guys that later became part of the greatest players of all time conversation. There was a bunch of them. There was a bunch of guys like that. And as you went through the NBA, and especially Jordan, though, could you tell? I mean, that group was so good. Let's go to Jordan first. Could you tell as a college player he was going to be that good? He was always good, but could you tell he was going to be that good?
No, you could not. And the reason for that is the way the game was played in college, right? And the way Dean Smith coached his teams. There was no one person that was going to dominate and take over. It was a team game. And regardless of how good Michael Jordan could have been individually in college, he had to sacrifice that. He won an NCAA championship as well the year before we did. Mm-hmm. But I actually commend Coach Dean Smith for the way he played, the way he coached, because that's what college basketball was, right? It was a kind of an unadulterated game for young men to go in and play together and achieve something great. Mm-hmm. So, and not that it's not like that now. There are a lot of great coaches out there that do that, but I think it starts kind of in AAU now, which kind of caters to that individualism. You're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So if you go here and you're not the guy, go somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just kind of the game that's played. Like it or not, that's just what it is. Mm-hmm. But Michael Jordan came to NC State for a visit. Mm-hmm. Me and Whit took him around and laced him up a little bit, and Sid and Whit would tell you, like, we didn't see like anything super special. But I always say to people, I say, who knew that Michael was going to be, quote unquote, greatest player ever played? Mm-hmm. I mean, he knew. Mm-hmm. Right? He knew. That's what he wanted. That was his goal. And it wasn't until maybe his third, fourth in the NBA that you started to see, the dream team year where Magic thought he was the sheriff, and nope, time to hand over pass the torch to a guy who, he wanted it.
Yeah.
And there was no stopping.
Yep. Thurl, when I look back and I see like our era, I played 83 to 87 in college, and you were kind of in that same, just right before me. And we have this era now with NIL, college kids are able to make money, which on one hand I think is a great thing. I get it, guys that have their name and their likeness, and you're selling the jersey. If I'm selling a Thurl Bailey jersey in the bookstore, I get that, there needs to be ways for these young guys and gals to make money. The television contract is over $1 billion a year just for the tournament. But then the NCAA brought the portal in at the same time, so now kids can just transfer every year. And a lot of the coaches I talk to, Thurl, what they say that, and I've had Jay Wright on my show and Jim Boeheim, and I've had a lot of guys, Jim Herrick, and the thing that we feel you're kind of missing now is the player in your era, in my era, when you struggled, when you struggled, and we've all struggled, it's part of it. The answer was to get better, and you got to find a way to fight through it and get better and stay with it and be persistent and be resilient. And you can't just always hunt for something else. There's a hunt for somewhere else that's better. And then the development, like you talked earlier about your relationship with Coach Valvano, and I just fear we're going to lose that right now. I'm for the guys and gals getting money, but I just fear that that's what's missing now, is that building that relationship over a 3 or 4 year period of time, probably like you did with your coaches in college.
Coach, I don't know if we'll ever get back
Yeah.
to that being the most important thing for these young athletes anymore. Because that's not the area, that's not where we live right now. The dollar is king. And look, I'm not against, as you said, some kind of, payment or something that rewards these athletes for using their name and likeness. But I think it's incumbent upon the NCAA, because once you take that genie out of the bottle, you can't put it back in, right? And so what is fair? What is fair for one player and not another? I mean, what's the price that you have to pay? The greatest 4 years of my life were in college. Now, it was a different time. Basketball saved my life. I mean, I grew up in a pretty tough PG County area, and I had great parents who raised me the right way, kept me on the right path. But basketball was my outlet, and I needed to get education was primary. I was going to college to my parents and me to a certain extent, because I knew I loved to play. I was going to college to get my education. And so I could communicate with people. So one day I could get a job. So one day, if I was to make a lot of money, I knew how to manage that money myself and not have to trust someone who I may end up mistrusting one day. So yeah, we're missing a lot of that now. And our young people don't really know what the past was really like, because, players are making money in college. And so that gives a lot of these schools an advantage. And there are schools who aren't able to do what these others. So they have to sell a different way, right? They have to sell the old way, maybe. And so it's tough. It's tough. I don't know the answer for it. I've got a kid in college who's of this era at Utah Tech. And so, so we have to wait and see if there's maybe some regulation going to happen. But you got one kid here making $8 million and got a kid making $200,000 or $300,000. I mean, I think it takes something away from the game with the transfer portal and kids moving to where the highest bidder is. It's for me, it's out of control.
Yeah. I hope they can figure it out, because I always too look at us and in leadership positions, and I was a coach, and I was on our national coaches board. You still want to do what's best for young people. That's got to be part of the equation. And yeah, they're able to make money. That's good. And maybe sometimes transferring if there's a coaching change. I get all that. There's always some things, but hopefully we always still look out and say, okay, what's best for this young person? Because that's the role we're in as leaders in our leadership position with young people. And I'm a little nervous right now that we're not doing what's truly best for them and teaching them the life lessons that they need to have as they continue on after college and play. And it's like you and your wife. I've met your wife. She's so amazing and wonderful. And you go back and look at your children, and I've met your children. They're all phenomenal. But did you guys in kind of intentionally, because character for you is such an amazing part of who you are and who your wife is, but that's become a part of your children. Nobody's perfect out there, but intentionally trying to build characteristics into your children? Was that part of you and your wife, like you wanted to do for your kids, and these are the characteristics I would love for them to have?
I actually think every parent wants that, right? I really do. And parenting is hard. It's difficult now, but it's rewarding. And, I have other kids. I was married before, and I have several kids, a couple of boys from that marriage who are out on their own doing great things, and a daughter also in the DC area who's doing great things. But my wife Cindy and I, we come from two different backgrounds. She's from a farm in Richfield, Utah, raised to get up 5:30, sometimes 4:30 in the morning to take the cows up the mountain, and so she learned how to work early on in her life. And of course, my dad and mom taught me the meaning of doing what you say and saying what you mean, and not just trying to talk the talk. So in raising our kids, we just try to do the best we can do. We want our kids to be people first, and we want our kids to work hard. It's incumbent upon them to earn their own way in life. Their last name might be Bailey, but they're going to have their own story, right? They're going to be part of a big legacy, hopefully, and they're going to add to that. But you want your own individual story, your own individual accomplishments, your own failures, your own bounce backs, your own amazing stories. And so there's never a guarantee, Coach. You know that as well as I do. Mm-hmm. Never a guarantee in this life that your kids are going to be successful. They're going to have happy marriages. They're going to make it through school. There's always going to be something that is trying to, to keep them from going where they want. But hopefully all the things that we put into them, we tried to teach them. You hope they were listening because the adversary is strong. Yeah. And so sometimes you just got to continue to pray for them. And as they go out on their own in this world that's filled with a lot of stuff on this thing here, that they're always and they're making judgments about you and other people and things. And so we didn't have all that, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, boy, get your butt outside and play. Mm-hmm. And we had to be creative in that. Yep. So hopefully we haven't lost a lot of that. And that's why we try to get together as a family, regardless of how old they are and where they are. We always try to come back and get together as a family and spend some time in the summer together.
Yeah. Well, you guys have done an amazing job, Thurl, and you as a person too. I said this when we started the podcast. One of the great people that I've gotten to know, regardless of basketball. And but before we go, okay, this is going to be a fun one for you. And I've asked a lot of people this one. I had Robert Ory on, and Robert and I go way, way back in our that's right, in our Alabama days. And I'm going to make this question just a tad bit different for you because you played, obviously, against one of these guys. You were the next one was he came in after you, but then you're also involved with television now, with the Utah Jazz, the NBA, college. So you're around the game still, very much around. But here's the question, Thurl. You got to win a game. You have to win tonight, okay? If you don't win, you're never allowed in the gym again ever for the rest of your life, and you got one pick. You can only pick one guy to be on your squad, and you got to choose between LeBron, Kobe, and Michael. Now, if you lose, Thurl, you're done. You can't ever come back. So you have to win the game. You get to pick one guy. Who are you picking?
Well, when you put it like that, it's only one guy. You telling me I have to win?
You have to win the game.
Come on. There's only one guy. If you put that question like that to Michael Jordan, you're winning.
It's easy.
You're winning.
This is not hard.
LeBron might miss a free throw. LeBron might miss a free throw at the end, or I don't know. But Michael's not going to let you down. All he needs is a reason. All he needed was a reason, right? Just give him one. Tell him that. It's over if you lose. It's Michael. I thought the question was going to be
That was easy, wasn't it? I try to tell my young kids, some of them talking about LeBron, who's obviously great, but I said, guys, time out. Just stop. Hold on. There was a guy who wore number 23, and he was a little bit different than the rest of them. So that's my take.
And those other ones, the Kobe Bryant. You know, I got 1 year with him in the league and watched him grow. I watched him come in Utah, shoot 3 air balls his rookie season.
Right. Exactly. People forget that. People forget that now. His first couple years, how bad he struggled. How bad he struggled until he got going. So
watch his growth, and LeBron, just a guy who's at our age and playing still. Well, not quite our age.
It's crazy.
The guy's amazing.
Well, Thurl, yeah, I got you. Number 23. Well, man, it's been great, and you're one of the best, Thurl, and my best wishes to you, your family, and I'm sure we will cross paths again. But thank you so much for being on the Front Row Podcast.
We absolutely will cross paths. I'm going to call you when we're headed up your way. So
Come on.
Take me to dinner.
Anytime.
All right.
All right, Thurl Bailey. Thank you, Thurl. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach.